Hami baby, Uncle Botina Hamia, Chante Washten, Apechu Zapia, Yushkawachia copy, Namaya Humpe Chab, Pinamaya Yapi. Hi everyone, my name is Uncle Botina and I am talking to you today. I'm grateful for the chance to talk to you today. And I'm greeting you with a good heart as I do so, about the process that we can use that we call pedagogical elicitation. That's two complicated words together, but the process that we can use when we have time to talk to a fluent speaker of a language. So this applies for endangered languages generally, particularly Indigenous languages, but any language that's endangered. When we have the time to work with such a speaker, there's a process that we can use to draw out their language knowledge in such a way that it's quickly applicable for language teachers. As you probably know, I am a language teacher and a trainer of language teachers. I am a very grateful learner of the Dakota language and Lakota language. And my work is about helping teachers be more effective. And when I say effective, what I mean is helping teachers design lessons and classes that result in their students becoming speakers of the language very quickly. Because our goal when a language is endangered is to produce new speakers. And so in the format that I use, it's total immersion. I advocate for an 80 to 90% immersion approach at all levels, but at the beginning level, I use a 100% immersion approach. And I design, excuse me, the course is based on a set of research, what we would call a theory, called usage-based linguistics. And usage-based linguistics comprises another set of research called construction grammar. I'm going to explain the basics of that. But using those techniques, I designed project-based, hands-on, interactive immersion courses where students are able to hold full, free-flowing conversations after approximately 10 hours of lessons. Within about 10 hours, they are able to hold conversations entirely in the language, answer new questions, ask for new language, and survive in a total immersion environment. Most learning of endangered languages is held back by the fact that we don't have many immersion environments. And so we need to make up for that essentially by having our language classes or our courses, even if we're teaching one-on-one, even if we're, a grandparent teaching a grandchild, whatever scenario, we need to make up for that lack of opportunity by having really effective, really immersive teaching environments that allow people to get that much exposure and become a speaker that quickly. And so I teach teachers how to do that. This presentation today is for those of you who are working in a Master-Apprentice scenario where you have access to a master speaker, a fluent speaker, a mentor speaker, someone who has more experience in the language, someone who speaks the language well, who is willing to teach you the language, but this is how you can work with them in such a way that you are very quickly transforming what they teach you into curriculum that can be used with learners. In many communities, there's so few people working to save a language that you may be doing this all on your own. You may be independently developing relationships with speakers or speaker. You may be meeting with them, learning the language, studying yourself, designing the curriculum, and teaching the language. That's kind of the worst case scenario, is that you have to do this all yourself. And so I'm working, and this is just the beginning of this work, but I'm working to figure out a really good system for you to be able to do that as efficiently as possible, because it's really hard work. And part of what's hard about it is that there's lots of programs out there that teach you about linguistics, and it's very possible to learn how to do language documentation, but it's much, much harder to learn how to be an effective teacher and how, particularly for these types of languages, how to create speakers quickly, and then how to design curriculum to create speakers quickly. That is really not talked about and not worked on. So that's where my work is. So I want to provide a quick little template or guide for you for how you can do this work effectively and efficiently so that you spend the least amount of time and effort possible to get the most results possible. So this is pedagogical elicitation, also known as drawing out language for learners. My background, I'm a non-Indigenous person. I'm a descendant of white settlers from northern Minnesota in the United States. That is Dakota and Ojibwe land. I live on Dakota land in Minneapolis. I am talking to you currently from Sichahu, Lakota land in Nebraska, South Dakota. And I am a very grateful learner of Dakota and Lakota. My expertise is in curriculum design and teacher training. And so I am here to help teachers be more effective, as I mentioned. And the organization that I work under is Multilingual Futures. That's the umbrella for all the work that I do to help teachers. So feel free to check out my website and this channel for more info on how I can help teachers. And if you are a teacher of an endangered language and you would like help, please reach out to me. I would love to work with you. So the idea here is that we're drawing out the language in a certain way, and we're doing so bearing in mind how the language lessons should be. And those language lessons should be designed in such a way that they work with how the brain learns language best. I always like to say before I get too far into my talks that my perspective on language teaching is, I live in the United States. In the United States, all high schoolers are required to take 2 years of a language. And many people will say, well, 2 years isn't long enough to become fluent. I had the opportunity, I was very grateful to have the opportunity to travel to a place where people spoke Arabic without much preparation. And Arabic is a very hard language to learn if you're an English speaker because there's no similarities between the languages, much like many Indigenous Turtle Island languages compared to English, no similarities. And I became a fluent speaker of Arabic in about 6 months. So the issue isn't that 2 years isn't enough time. The issue is that most people aren't getting that opportunity to have that much exposure, to have those speakers around, and they aren't getting lessons that work with their brain that help them to retain what they learn. And so they're taking 2 years of a language, whatever language they're taking, and they're not walking out fluent or anything close to it. What that tells me is that the methods we are using, the pedagogy that we are using, is not effective and should not be replicated. And endangered languages do not have time to waste on ineffective classes. So we're trying to make them more effective. So the question is, how does the brain learn language? So I mentioned that this falls under the umbrella of usage-based linguistics, and construction grammar is a part of that. A separate theoretical model, but that fits really well into usage-based linguistics. What is usage-based linguistics? Basically, scientists did something that was not done for a very long time and should have been done, which is that instead of making up theories and guesses about how people learned language, they just actually watched people learn language, very carefully observed them, took careful notes and measurements, and then explained what they observed of people learning language. When I say people learning language, I mean they studied babies and toddlers who are just naturally, being born and growing up in their environment and learning whatever language as their first language. And they studied adults who, let's say they immigrated to a new country when they were 30, for example, or 50 even, and they had to learn the language from zero. And so they're surrounded by the language just like a baby would be, but they are also having to learn. And they just watch what happens. What do they learn? How does it work? When it works, how does it work? Because we know how it works when it doesn't work, which is high school language classes in the United States. So how does it work when it works? So that research has been done, and a lot of good things were learned. And I am going to summarize that and tell you how we can move our language classes over to be more like what works. So the first concept is construction grammar. Basically what this means is that humans, when they are successfully learning a language in a naturalistic environment, they do not learn the language word by word by word by word by word. It doesn't work. It doesn't work to learn a bunch of words and then somehow magically figure out how to put them together. It doesn't work. When people learn word, 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 that's what they know. They know a bunch of words. And then they don't use them, so they just forget them over time. The way the brain really learns language is that it learns what I like to call chunks, or what they call constructions of language all together, basically phrases. We learn the whole phrase together, and we learn it in an experience, in a context. Something happens, and a phrase is used, and we grab that, and if we understand it, and if we hear it clearly, and if we get some repetition of it, we learn that phrase. So an example that I like to give is that most English speakers use the phrase, I could care less. And I love this because if you think about it, the way most people say it is, I could care less. I could care less. No, I could care less. What they're saying is, I could care less, which is the exact opposite of what they mean. They mean, I could not care less. That's what they mean. I couldn't care less. I don't care. That's what it means. But people will say, I could care less. And everyone around them understands the exact opposite of what they say. Oh, you don't care, right? And that's because we have all been exposed to multiple situations where the meaning was obvious. The meaning was, I don't care. And the person expressed that by saying, I could care less. And we don't even think about it as a bunch of discrete words. We usually just say it as a string of sounds. I could care less. I could care less. And we don't stop and think, hey, that's backwards. And there's actually another example that I'd like to steal from my mentor, Anaïs Donabedian, who is a Western Armenian speaker from France. She grew up in France. And I apologize if I'm saying this story a little bit wrong, but she told this story about her grandfather had like a sort of a swear that he would use when he would, stub his toe or drop something or be frustrated. He would shout this phrase. And so it was very clear to her as a child, like, this is a phrase that people say when they are frustrated, when something goes wrong, they say this phrase. And so she adopted it and she would say it, her whole life. And then she started learning English because she lives in France. So she started learning English later in life, maybe in her 50s. And as she learned English, she eventually learned the swear words in English and was shocked to discover that this phrase that her grandpa used to say, which her grandpa had, I believe, been from Turkey. So she just thought that it was Turkish. She just thought that it was a Turkish word that he was using. She discovered that it was the English phrase, son of a, but just said as all one word. And then he had learned through contact with English speakers earlier in his life, and he had adopted it. So she learned it. Oh, this happens, you say this, and she would just say it all together, and she never thought about the words until she learned English, heard someone say a similar swear, and went, oh, that's what that swear means. And didn't even know that it was from English. And so what I love about that story is your brain doesn't even need to know what language are we learning. Your brain doesn't even need to know, is that the same language we were just speaking or a different one? It doesn't need to know. What it needs to know is what's happening, what's the context, and then what do we say, and then how is that perceived, right? So I stubbed my toe, I yelled, son of a, right? And then people say, oh no, right? It's clear. And if there's enough repetition, your brain will know that, and you will be able to use it in the same way and pronounce it in exactly the same way. Even if you've never taken out a dictionary and broken it down, even if you've never stopped to think, I could care less, you don't need to do that. Your brain knows this situation, we say this phrase, and this is what happens. And that if you watch toddlers learn language, that's how toddlers learn language too. Many of us have been embarrassed. Many of us have a toddler who has seen us stub our toe and say something that maybe wasn't very toddler friendly. And then we have been horrified to watch that toddler drop and break something and then shout that same phrase that we said the other day. And we say, oh no, now our toddler is going to go out and say this phrase. That's excellent language learning. A situation happened where, something bad happened that I didn't want, and I was frustrated. And so when I feel frustrated because of what happened, I yell out this phrase. Toddlers are learning, right? But they also, they make up sort of like little variations that are easier for them to say. Toddlers have some physical limitations, right? They're learning how to actually physically say words. So once they get that going and they're completely able to physically speak, they just need lots of repetition, and they just learn what to say in each phrase and how to get the interaction or the reaction that they want. So that is how we know that the brain learns in phrases, in chunks, in constructions. And then what the brain also does is it learns possible variations. So for example, the brain learns that you can say, when you don't care, you can say, I could care less. Well, I could care less. I could care less. But then at some point we'll encounter a situation, the brain will learn that you can also say, oh, mom could care less whether you take that or not. Mom could care less whether you pass that class or not. Oh, no, dad could care less whether that's clean. We can switch out who's doing it. We can make that variation. But there are variations that are technically possible, but we can't make them. They don't make sense. For example, oh, dad could pay less for that. No. Oh, mom could run less. No, that doesn't, we can't switch that part of it out. So we learn through experiences that this variation works and can be said and can be understood, but this variation makes it nonsense, that you lose the meaning. That doesn't work. And so that's how our brain learns. This construction starts out like this, and it can be varied in the following ways, but it can't be varied in other ways. And then we apply them in the lived situations that we go through. So the job of the teacher, this is pretty tricky, is to create a bunch of lived experiences like that, a bunch of activities like that, where something happens, and get those phrases into our brain so that we remember them and their possible variations. And the way that I remember this is my most basic takeaway from usage-based linguistics, is that in order to learn some new language, we need certain ingredients. And I like to use the example, this has happened to me, that like if I go to a Chinese restaurant and there's a TV on and they have cable on from China, or let's say they have I like the example, they use a news broadcast, right? They're having a news broadcast, which means there's a picture of a correspondent sitting there talking, and there's words going across the screen, and they're talking in Chinese. Now, if I sit down to have my Chinese meal, I can listen to that. And if I sit there for 1 hour or 3 hours or 5 hours, I'm not going to learn Chinese. I can hear it. I'm being exposed to Chinese, but I'm not going to learn anything. And the reason for that is that I don't know what they're trying to say. They could be talking about anything. There's no clue of what they're trying to say. Now, if one of the waiters walks by and stubs his toe and yells out a swear in Chinese, that I might pick up. Or if he comes over and he wants to teach me how to say this soup is good in Chinese, and he coaches me and he models it for me and he has me repeat it, I might learn that. So I can learn Chinese, but not by just being exposed to it. I need some ingredients. My brain needs some ingredients. And those ingredients are the 4 F's. I remember them this way. The first one is function. I need to know what this means. What are you talking about? What is the meaning? What's the function? What's the purpose of what you're saying right now? So if I look over at a Chinese family and one child is hitting the other child and the mother says, stop that, don't hit your brother. I'm going to know. I'm going to know that that's what's going on. So that's my first hint, that I could learn whatever language she just said. I could learn whatever phrase she just said, because it's clear to me what's going on. It's clear to me what she's trying to say. That's the function. It might not be clear to me, what I means, could means, care means, and less means, not on that level, but what's going on? Why are we saying this? What's the situation that we're trying to say? That will get across to me. That's function. Form is what every language teacher is used to teaching. How do you pronounce it? And then how do you change it for the different situations? So what's the form it takes when it's in the present tense? What's the form it takes when it's in the future tense? What's the form it takes in the past tense? How do you say it when it's multiple people? How do you say it when it's only women doing it? Every language has their own rules, but the proper form of saying it, I have to learn that. And I have to clearly hear it. So I often need lots of repetition so I can clearly make out the sounds that I'm supposed to say. And then frequency. Frequency is a friendly term for repetition. I need it many times. You'll hear people say, oh, you have to hear a word 40 times to learn it. Or, oh, you have to hear a word 400 times to learn it. Or you have to hear a word 700 times to learn it. I don't know what the number is, but you definitely need some repetition. We definitely cannot just teach lessons, a new lesson every day and just magically expect that in April, our students are going to remember what we taught them in September. They're definitely not going to. They need frequency. It needs to come back many times. You have to think about a toddler. When a toddler is getting their first language for free, they're getting thousands of the same experiences. They're living how many days they're living that the same things are being said over years, literally thousands of days that they have chances to hear what people are saying and see the situations that they're saying them. As teachers, we don't have that kind of time. So we need to come up with activities that offer that frequency without being too boring. And that's really the hardest part of our job. How do we create many, many, many experiences of this so that folks have a chance to really get it into their brain and get it stuck in there without just drilling them in a boring way? That's really our challenge. And the last one is feedback. Feedback is really important. Natural feedback is not, I cross it out with a red pen on your paper and then I write in the correction. That's not natural feedback. Natural feedback is what happens when, I go to a new country and I want to say, I like to order a bowl of noodles, and I have my phrase book and I try it out, and then I see, did they get me or not? Did they understand me? Did they bring me a bowl of noodles or not? Did it go wrong? What happened? That's my feedback. Do they understand me or not? Or if I say, hey, knock it off, do they stop? Okay, that's my feedback. They understood me. That was clear. And with toddlers, we naturally do for them what we don't always do for adult language learners, and we need to, which is that with toddlers, we know they need feedback. We just naturally do it. So they say, more milk. And we say, oh yeah, you want more milk? Yeah, here you go, here's some milk. And we do happy face. Yeah, I understood you, right? We give them that feedback to encourage them to keep going. Or they say no water, and we say, oh, you don't want water. Oh, you don't want water, right? We give them that feedback. I understand what you are saying. Or if we don't quite understand what they're saying, but we guess, then they say no, wow. And you say, oh, no water. You don't want water. No water. Feedback, right? Adult language learners and older language learners need that too. They need to know, did you get me or not? Did I say it or not? And the best way to do that, instead of just correcting them all the time, is interactions. Having them say something like, hey, can you hand me the fork? And if the person hands them a fork, it works. So creating those situations in the language classroom. So you're going to be creating those situations with your mentor speaker, your master speaker in your Master-Apprentice team, so that you can learn, and then the teacher is going to create those in the classroom so that their students can learn. So those are the four, and I often repeat them to myself: function, form, frequency, feedback. Function, form, frequency, feedback. I need those four things in order to get new language stuck in my brain. So what can you do then? So the first thing that you can do is you can actually do activities with your master speaker. So as a MAP team, you can meet and actually physically do things and record everything. So this is where a portable video camera or your phone or a GoPro, something that captures everything that happens is super useful, or having multiple videos from multiple angles is super useful so you can capture everything, because then you want to really do things. And the reason you want to really do things is because, like, for example, like on this slide, they're showing the example of baking bread together, but you know, you can do it, you can do anything. You can build a fire together, you can take a canoe trip, you can bake a cake. Let's say, so let's use the example of baking a cake. If I were to say to you, how do you bake a cake? And if we were just sitting at a table talking, and I might even have pictures or a list of steps, I'm going to list things like you get the ingredients, you put them in a bowl, you mix them, you add water, you add oil, you heat it up, right? I'm going to go through those things. But when I actually physically bake the cake with my mentor speaker, other things are going to come up that I wouldn't have thought of. An example might be you crumble it between your fingers. The dough, it dries out and sticks to the bowl. You take a big scoop of it. You take a smaller scoop of it. Oops, that's too much. Take some out. I'm not sure if we should add that yet. Oh no, did I put too much in? This kind of language is not going to come out when you just talk about the activity. It's going to come out when you actually do the activity. And it's really useful because that's what I need in real life to really do the activity. So it's best to really do it together and see what happens. And importantly, I think of an activity as a set of interactions. So when we do an activity, two people, we say things back and forth to each other and we respond, feedback. So let's take an example of, I want to go on a short canoe trip. So I take my canoe and I put it in the water. Now, obviously, I can just get up in the morning and just go out and just put a canoe in the water by myself. I don't need to talk to do that. I can just do it without talking. But if I do it in my Master-Apprentice team, I'm going to want to talk about everything that I'm doing. I'm going to want to talk an absolute maximum. And so the kind of talk that I'm going to get is going to be a set of interactions. So think about it this way. The two people walk down to the waterfront area and they're going to put the canoe in the water to go on the trip. So there's going to be interactions like this. You want to take this one? No, the bigger one. Telling which canoe we're going to take. You want to take it at the back? Yep, I got it over here. Okay, I got it over here. Should we flip it? Yeah, but slowly. Try to walk a little faster. Oh, careful, don't drop it. We're going to say things back and forth to one another like that you wouldn't come up with if you just had a picture of a canoe and a lake and you said, oh, what's this, what's this? And you'll also notice that the things we say back and forth to each other are not a list of words. We don't go pick up the canoe and then say, this is a canoe. This is a paddle. This is the rim of the, I don't know canoe terminology, so sorry. But this is the bow. This is the stern. This is the frame. This is the seat. This is the, nobody talks like that. Nobody sits and says, this is my thumb. This is my fingertip. This is my pointer finger. This is my pointer finger fingertip. Nobody talks like that. That's not how we do interactions. But for some reason in language classes, we draw a picture of a canoe and we teach all the parts. Great, but what can I do with that language? I need interactions. So things like pick it up higher. Let's flip it over. Set it down gently. Don't go too far. Hold on. Keep it back here for a minute. Those are the things we actually say to each other. That's how we actually speak the language in real life. So those are the interactions that you want to capture as you're doing it. It's good to also know what things are called, but in the context of when would I actually say that to someone? Language is about interacting with other people. For the most part, there's also things like prayers and songs and stories and monologues, and you can teach those too, but they still happen in context. We don't pray by just standing outside and saying 5, yellow, car, B, house, 12, brown. But that's often what we teach in language classes. So we need those constructions. What are we actually going to say? How are we going to get meaning across? So actually doing the activity. And when you're doing that, you're capturing those phrases, those whole phrases. Either during the activity or at a separate time. You should have a meeting later where you talk about how that went when you did the activity. So either in the activity or in the follow-up meeting, you're going to want to talk about different forms of things. So for example, if the mentor speaker says, "Don't drop that," and that was a new phrase for you, you might think later to ask, now how would you say "I dropped it"? Or "I'm so sorry I dropped it." Or, "Oh, I'm glad you almost dropped it. I'm glad you didn't." How do we say that in our language? How do you say, "Kids are always dropping things"? So you can look for those variations that are not just that one way of saying it and get that information. And that can be really helpful for your classes, and we'll talk about why. But you want to get those whole phrases and some variations on those phrases. You can get the variations while you're working together or in your follow-up meeting. And you want to make sure you're getting these interactive forms and you know the response. Now, a lot of times in an interaction, in a conversation, a response is something like, In Dakota, Lakota, a lot of things are responded to with or That's not even, a complex sentence, or you could argue that those things aren't really even words. That's what we call back channeling. But that's really good information that in this culture, it would be appropriate to respond to that with right? That's really good information. So we want to see those and we want to look for corrections. So it's a good idea to ask your speaker, well, what if I said, "You dropped it tomorrow"? Does that work? And they can say, no, dropped means it's in the past. Oh, okay. Right, those corrections, like looking for what's wrong, can really help you to learn the rules, and that's what linguists do, right? Linguists elicit things. So when you're learning something new that you haven't heard before, try it out in different forms and ask them, would this still sound good? Would that be right? And if they say no, ask why. Because it might be wrong because that would be rude. I would understand you, but it would be rude. Oh, very good information. Or it's wrong because it doesn't make sense. You conjugated it wrong. It's nonsense. Or it's wrong because women don't say it that way. Men say it that way. Oh, different kind of information. So it's always good to ask, why would that be wrong? And look for those things. This is something really good to do at your follow-up meeting. And then also the heart of the follow-up meeting for me is checking leveled variations. So what do I mean by leveled variations? If you have been a language teacher, especially of an endangered language, you know that one of the great challenges is that it's almost impossible to truly separate out the levels of your learners, their level of proficiency. You will often come to a class that's supposed to be for beginners, and they will have intermediate level. You will come to an intermediate class and find a total beginner. You will have a low intermediate class and have someone show up who's advanced. This is how it often works out. The beauty of using project-based learning and hands-on learning is that everyone can still participate, but only if you as a teacher or the teacher is prepared to offer different levels of complexity for the same communication. Let me give an example. If I'm a high intermediate speaker, an advanced speaker of the language, I might be able to say something like, can you just grab it under there, just with the tip of your finger, can you just grab it and just lift it a little bit? Thank you. But a beginner speaker cannot say that. But a beginner speaker might be able to say, I could teach them to say something like higher, lower, good, no, wrong. We could get the same thing done, right? They could still participate. Or you take it higher, you take it higher. Understandable, right? And so as someone who's preparing for the teaching, you want to sit and look at the constructions that you've got. And you want to think about what's a simpler way to get the same idea across and what's a more complex way, so that I would be able to offer something to whatever level of learner came to my class that they could learn those phrases, and it would work for them, and they would still be able to participate. So they might not be able to say, crumble it between your fingers until it's nice and fine, and then sprinkle it across the bowl. But they might be able to say, make it small and put it in the bowl. Might be able to teach them that. So we prep what we want them to learn. Now, I said that an activity is a collection of many interactions. That means for one activity, even if that activity lasts for 5 or 10 minutes, they're going to need to know many constructions in order to actually do it themselves. And of course, we want the learners to actually do it, not just be with the teacher while the teacher is doing it. We want them to actually do it and interact. So in order to do that, we're going to need lots of preparation. Going on a 20-minute canoe trip around the lake is going to take many days of lessons before they're going to know all the language that they need to know, until they've got the 4 F's for all the constructions that they need to complete the canoe trip. So they're going to have many lessons where they do smaller parts of the activity, like we just pick up a canoe and set it down, or we pick up a canoe and flip it over, or we put other things into water that aren't canoes, because that's kind of a big thing to have in our classroom or our living room. So we might just practice putting other things into water, and we say the things that are going along with that. We play games with that, and we practice the language. In each lesson, it's good to only have between 4 and 7 new constructions in each lesson. You can review other constructions, but you cannot teach someone 40 phrases in one lesson. If you do that, the lesson is basically wasted. They won't learn anything. It's too much. The brain can't handle it. So the brain needs 4 to 7 new constructions. So I can teach 7 constructions on day 1, and then 7 more constructions on day 2, and then 7 more constructions on day 3. Now they know 21 constructions. That's a lot. So you can get them talking fast if you plan it out well, but you need to plan it out so that they play games and sing songs and do activities with just a few constructions, and then add on each time. And they need that repetition, that frequency. So they come back and they do the same types of things, and they use those same phrases over and over and over again, so that it's really stuck in there. They've got that frequency before you actually do the whole activity when you put it all together. This is a tool that you can use and that you can contribute to. I've built this Trello board. It's basically like a bulletin board where teachers work from a list of the types of interactions that people can have in language. This is originally developed by linguists who did research, but I've been adapting it to multiple languages and adding new languages and adding new ideas from teachers. So we're building off of that. And so if you want an idea of what kind of interactions people can do in languages, what kind of things do my students ultimately need to learn and master, this is a place where we are building that. And you can interact with it and add it, translate it to your language, and work with that to get ideas and to share your ideas with other teachers. This is the to-do list that I've developed. You'll see the slides attached here. You can go and print this out if this helps you as a template for how you can work together as a Master-Apprentice team. Feel free to post any questions. So the main takeaway is you want to think about constructions, phrases, chunks of language, and you want to always think about how students are going to get those 4 F's. How are they going to understand the function without you translating? How are they going to be in a situation so that they're going to know what the meaning is supposed to be? How are you going to show them, act them out, make them feel the meaning? The form, knowing how it's said and what possible variations it has. Frequency, enough repetition that they get exposed to it over and over like a toddler until it gets stuck in there. Feedback. Is it interactive enough that they're going to be able to see a response from what they say when they practice, so they'll know whether they're getting it or not, what's going to happen when they try to say it. So, I want to thank Prairies to Woodlands Indigenous Language Revitalization Circle for inviting me to put this talk together. I've put this recording together separately so that the participants from their workshop didn't have to appear in this video, but I want to thank them for the invitation to present about this material, and also for their collaboration as we keep trying to think about these ideas. Please share your ideas if you have suggestions, different ways that you would do this. And feel free to reach out to me for any help or collaboration that might interest you at multilingualfutures.com. Pina mai api, toksake.